All right, so today we're going to continue the research process by utilizing the research question to narrow our online database search and to build knowledge of credible and reliable sources, as well as to be able to distinguish between primary and secondary sources. And then I'm going to show you the source notes so that you can organize your research findings. All right, I'm going to try to get through this as quickly as possible. There is no assignment for today, so when we're done, you guys will be able to work on some stuff. All right. So let the investigation continue. We're going to be sifting through sources. So now that we have our research question, most people think, okay, now I can just dive in and start researching, but that's not necessarily the case, because there's two things you have to be able to identify. You need to be able to identify reliable and credible sources versus unreliable and non-credible sources. And then also primary and secondary sources. Okay, with the primary and secondary sources, that's not so important here in high school, but when you get beyond high school, it will be important. I honestly hate primary and secondary sources, but I need to make sure that you guys know the difference. So when you're utilizing the online database from the schools, you don't really have to worry about reliability and credibility so much, but what do you guys tend to use a lot to search things? Google. And in Google, there are going to be a lot of sources that are not credible or reliable, right? That's part of the issue that's going on today with the spread of mass misinformation, okay? Because people just share things thinking, oh, that sounds credible, and it really isn't. So we're just going to watch a little clip. These clips are less than 5 minutes, so there's just 2 of them. We're going to watch them, and then if you have any questions, let me know.
Students often receive research assignments requiring the use of credible sources. But what does it mean for a source to be credible? Why is it important to use these sources? And how can you tell if a source is credible? When we describe a source as credible, we're basically saying that the information is high quality and trustworthy. Essentially, that we can believe what the source is telling us. When you use high quality sources to back up your points, you demonstrate your own credibility as a writer, thereby contributing to the overall effectiveness of your argument. The best quality research builds on other high quality research. This is true of both your own work and the work of professional researchers. There are several factors that contribute to a source's credibility. Among them are the author's level of expertise, her point of view, and the source's publication date. The author's level of expertise on the topic he or she is writing about could take the form of an advanced degree or other extensive experience in the field. A credible source often provides information about the author's credentials. Sometimes, however, the author's credentials may not be listed, and the publication itself can be the marker of quality. This is often true for some non-scholarly publications like well-respected newspapers and magazines, where the article's content is critically examined as part of the publication process. Another important component of a source's credibility is its point of view, in particular, its potential bias. Bias is an inaccurate or unfair presentation of information. In some cases, bias is intentional. A group with its own agenda may sponsor research or information, and the sponsorship may influence the results. Bias can also be unintentional. A writer's perspective may prevent him or her from being able to see all sides of an issue. Sometimes you need unbiased facts to support your point, but other times you might want people's opinions, and that's okay, as long as you acknowledge the source's perspective in your own work. While bias can be difficult to detect, be aware that it can exist in any kind of source, including things you find through the library. In the academic publishing world, books and articles go through a rigorous editorial process, in which an editor or group of scholars evaluate the work's quality. When it comes to journal articles, this process is called peer review. Peer review articles are considered high quality because the review process helps to filter out sources that are written by unqualified or biased authors. Finally, with any source, consider when it was published or last updated. Even something that was once high quality can now be out of date and unsuitable for some purposes. If I needed current statistics on the average cost of college in the United States, a source published in the 1990s would be out of date. However, if I was looking at the increase in college tuition over the last few decades, a source from the 1990s might fit my purposes. Of course, not every credible source is appropriate for your research. Be sure to evaluate not only a source's trustworthiness, but also its appropriateness for your argument. For help finding credible sources or determining whether a source you found is credible, ask a librarian.
Okay, So that's pretty straightforward, right? What's credible, what's not. So the things that you do, I really want to point out is you do want to be careful with who the author is. You want them to be an expert in their field. A good way to make sure of that is one, to use the online databases, but also I always select peer-reviewed articles. Do you know what that means?
Articles reviewed by multiple people to make sure that it's true.
Accurate, and it's within that field, right? So if it's a scientific article, a peer-reviewed article, other scientists would actually review that to make sure that it's accurate information.
So is that why they say like reviewed by then so and so?
Yes, and so I like to use peer-reviewed articles. One, it also narrows down your search because remember, sometimes you're gonna get thousands and thousands of articles. But if you look at the peer-reviewed ones, that normally cuts it in half, okay? So, and remember that somebody can be credible if they have a degree in that field, or if they have a lot of expertise in it, if they've been teaching for a while. So I could, because I have a degree in English, right? So you can trust me when I'm talking about some of the things from English, right? But if I don't have a teaching degree, but am I still a credible source? I am, because I actually have done teaching and I've actually been in the class, right? And I've actually done trainings, right? So when you look back over my past, you see that I've done a lot of things with teaching. So therefore that makes me a credible source. Now, am I as credible as say Mrs. Spada, who has like 10, 15 years? No, possibly not, right? But I might be more credible in certain areas, right? So I've done a lot of writing. I have an English degree in writing. That might be vastly different from her, right? So you want to be careful with that. There are ways to find out if something is credible or not, or just kind of some tips to look at. I call them the red flags of fake news. They may not necessarily be fake, but they're not going to be good for your paper, okay? So first, is there an author? Now, as I pointed out, there's going to be every once in a while, you'll come across something that'll say staff writer. So if it's from Psychology Today, which is a respected magazine about psychology, I can probably use that, right? If it just says staff writer, because it's gone through a review process before it was ever put in that publication. But if I'm looking at a staff writer from what's called the National Enquirer, which I don't think you guys know what that is. You guys know what that is?
Hello?
It's like our old day in print TMZ.
Wow.
Am I really gonna want to use that as a credible source? No, okay? So if there is an author, is he or she credible? The easiest, a lot of times what you can do, especially if it's online, you can click the author's name and it'll give you their credentials. Now, if you click it and there's nothing there, right? You can always Google that name. And let's say they're writing about politics in this article that you want to use, but when you go and Google him, you find out he's never written about politics before. He only normally covers celebrity gossip. Is that really an article you want to trust? He may have good points, but he's really not credible, right? So also, does the headline match the content? A lot of times you're going to see these really flashy headlines that make you want to read it, and then you start to read it and there's a complete disconnect or it's misleading. Throw those out. You don't want to use them. Is the story believable or completely outrageous? This is very true of those type of magazines that are like in articles that are from like TMZ and things like that. You don't want to use those. Are there citations, links, or references listed? So credible sources tend to use other credible sources, right? If you ever go to like a CNN or Fox News, they will normally have links that you can go look at where they got the information from. You want those they have more support. If they're always anonymous person said, anonymous person, da, 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 you really don't want to use that, right? You can't verify. And are there any grammar, spelling, or citation errors? This is big. Now, I'm not gonna lie, even today, I've seen credible sources mess up grammar and spelling every once in a while, but it's a rare thing. If you see a lot of them, just toss out that whole article, right? It's probably not a credible source. Make sense? Yes.
So we shouldn't trust the Onion?
No. Now you can reference the Onion if you're trying to, like, for a hook or something, like for a paper, like if you're trying to get interest or talk about satire, you would use the Onion.
Okay.
So also it is based on what kind of research you're doing. If I am doing a research paper on satirical news, the Onion would be a good source, right? Just like the Daily Show would be a good source, right? Or the Colbert Report. So you really want to be thinking about what you're researching, okay? And then, so I also included, I'm not gonna go over it, but for you guys just to have as reference, this is from EasyBib, and I thought it was really nifty. It's a way to evaluate a news article to see about its reliability and credibility. Because you really want to use the most reliable and credible sources within your research. All right, sound good? Okay, so that's the first thing you need to know about sources. The second thing is about primary, secondary. Now, I'm not gonna lie, Ms. Garcia is horrible at primary and secondary, partly because as I was having a conversation with Coach Johnson, I realized that most of the research that I've done throughout my academic career has been with secondary sources. Why is that? Because most of the works that I work with are translated from Chinese. Okay, so they're translated, and most of the works that I study are from 4th century BC. Can I go talk to that actual author? No, if I could, that would be an issue, and I need to write a different type of article, right? About how I'm talking to some poet from 4th century BC. So it's gonna help you distinguish. Again, in high school, this is not that big of a deal. I just want you to kind of know it. I will never ask you for specifics like that, like, oh, you have to have one primary source and 4 secondaries. But when you get past college or even past this class, they might say that. So you need to have somewhat of an understanding. So this is about a 3-minute video that will kind of just help you with that.
The content of your research project will be made up of primary and secondary sources. Primary and secondary sources come in many different formats, and there are benefits for referencing both types in your assignment. It can be difficult to figure out if a source is considered primary or secondary, but don't worry, because we'll explain the differences here so that you can decide which are best to use in your assignment. Primary sources are first-hand accounts of an event, topic, or historical time period. Anything that contains original information on a topic is considered a primary source. Examples of primary sources include things like letters or personal diaries or journals, original photographs, speeches, newspaper reports, creative works like paintings, plays, and music, and research data or surveys. It's a good idea to use primary sources in research papers because it allows you to form your own argument to defend your thesis, since the information you're using is unfiltered by another person's point of view. You're able to critique an original work using your own ideas. Secondary sources interpret, critique, or analyze primary sources. It is information that is created or published from primary sources. Examples of secondary sources include things like textbooks, essays or reviews, encyclopedias, newspaper articles that analyze or discuss events and ideas, and criticisms and commentaries. It's a good idea to use secondary sources in research papers because you can learn about new perspectives that you may not even be considered, and they can also strengthen your own argument in the assignment. For example, if you're writing a history paper about how the diversity of the city shifted during a certain time period, you could use data from the US Census Bureau to compare populations across the decades. This type of information would be considered a primary source, as it's data that's simply been collected and compiled. There is no analysis. That's what you'll be doing in the paper. For the same topic, you can also use an article from a newspaper that reviews the data and draws conclusions or analysis from it, such as other ways in which the population might change or grow over time. Some sources, like scholarly journals and newspapers, can serve as both a primary and a secondary source, depending on which article you're reading. Articles that include things like eyewitness accounts or interviews and are published close to the time of the event you're researching would be a primary source. Articles that are published after the fact and include analysis or critiques are secondary sources. Primary and secondary sources can both strengthen and improve your research immensely by providing you with information to create an argument and defend your thesis statement. Now that you know how to differentiate between them, try using them in your own assignment.
Okay, so again, in high school, you may not be required to differentiate between them, but when you get past it, when you get to college, you might. So for example, I was talking about translations. Why would translations not be a primary source?
Because how you translate it can differ from other people.
Exactly. So to translate from one language to another, the person that's translating it will often put their own spin on it. And so that's why it's not the original content, right? Now, again, there's gonna be some studies where you can't really find the primary, right? I'm not gonna lie, my studies, I rarely would ever come across a primary source, right? I don't have the actual text from 4th century BC, and even if I could, I can't read traditional Chinese, right? So I have to rely on translations, but that's when credibility comes into it. So when I would do my research, I would tend to go look for interpretations or analysis by a guy named Burton Watson. Now he's from the 50s, which may sound like, oh, well, it wouldn't be relevant, but he's considered like the premier guy for literary analysis for Chinese poetry. So I can rely on him even though it's older. Does that make sense? Okay, because most times your teachers are not going to want you to have anything that's older than maybe 10 years. Why is that? Yeah, it's more updated, more accurate information. But a lot of times when you are doing literary analysis and those types of things, you will have to go a little bit further, okay? So again, it just depends on your type of research. All right, so now that we understand that, okay, I do want to show you how to utilize the database for your source notes, because let me just give you an overview of how the next several weeks are going to go. Tomorrow, you guys are going to do a scavenger hunt, kind of like the Purdue OWL one, but with online databases. Then next week, okay, I will be out for most of the week because it is start testing for freshmen and 11th graders. But what you're going to do is you're going to be researching conspiracy theories. You're going to be asked to choose a conspiracy theory from a list, or you can offer up one of your own, as long as I approve it. You're going to generate your own research question. Then you're going to have to find 5 sources. One source does need to be some form of YouTube video, okay? Just because I want you to get used to using those types of sources, yes.
Does it have to be a YouTube video or can it be like a documentary?
It can also be a documentary, yes, okay? I just say YouTube because most kids will use YouTube, but you can do documentary. I want you to get used to using sources outside of text, right? Because we're a digital age and that's what we do. The other 4 sources, 2 of them have to be from the online database. The other 2 are up to you. They can either be from the online database or from Google, right? I tend to use the online databases just because it's easier across the board, right? I know it's credible, I know it's reliable, and it gives me the citations, right? Because what you're gonna have to do is create source notes, and I'm gonna show you what that looks like for each of those sources, okay? Because when you get past 10th grade, you might be asked to do a bibliography. Do you guys know what that is?
No.
Okay,
It's a story of someone's life.
no, that's a biography. So a bibliography in MLA is what happens is for every single source you have to provide the in-text type, you have to provide the works cited citation, and then you have to give me a paragraph of that summarizes it. And then you give me a paragraph of how you're going to use it. Or if you're even going to use it, okay? So technically you have to write a paper for every single source. So bibliography, if you have 5 sources, would be 5 pages that you have to write. What you're going to find out too is how you'll use it. Sometimes you won't, but even if you didn't use it, it helped form your argument, so you have to cite it. Does that make sense? Okay, I do not require this. Instead, I want to give you the foundations of it, which is what I call source notes. So source notes look like this. And let me make it bigger for you guys. And you're going to do them in Word, okay? And I'm going to give you like a step-by-step video that shows you how to do it using it. So for an article from an online database, I ask you for all this information. The article title, author, journal, page range, published date, online database, DOI, which is basically a research paper social security number, or the URL, and then the date access. Where can I get all this information in the database?
It doesn't give it to you.
It gives it to you in the citation itself, the works cited citation. So you can just go to the works cited citation and copy all that information here. Then I ask you just to take notes. I don't ask for full sentence notes. I do ask for them to be bullet form, and I'm going to show you how to set that up. And you would just basically take notes from that article. The reason I'm asking you to do that is it helps you analyze the article better, and it also makes it easier when you're writing, if you're writing a paper, so that you can go back. And then 2 direct quotes that you think would have supported what you're trying to argue or your research question. Then I just want the works cited citation. I also have an example for a website or web page, and then also the one for YouTube. If it's a documentary, you would put documentary, okay? So that's pretty easy. That's all you're gonna be required to fill out when you're doing your sources. Then at the end of the week, what you're gonna do is you're gonna submit your source notes. And then you're also gonna provide me what I call a summary of findings. You're just gonna tell me what you found out about your conspiracy theory or your unsolved mystery. You're gonna tell me and then kind of give me an idea of, do you think that the conspiracy theory is true or not based on your research, or what happened based on your research, okay? The reason I'm having you do this is next week you're doing conspiracy theories, the week after you're doing unsolved mysteries. The final week before finals, I have decided not to give a final exam, but to do a final project. So here's what you'll do. But here's what you're gonna do. That final week, you can work by yourself or with a partner. And you're gonna think about your conspiracy theories and unsolved mysteries, all the information you've gathered. You're gonna choose either or, right? Either conspiracy theory or the unsolved mystery. Then you can provide me either a video with information, like an informational video, kind of like the way BuzzFeed does it sometimes, or you can do a podcast. Podcast can be video or it can just be audio. You can work with somebody in the class or you can work with somebody outside the class. I don't care, as long as it gets done, okay? I'm gonna have certain requirements that you do have to hit. I'll provide that at that time. As long as you get it turned in before the day of the exam, you will not have to take any form of exam, okay? Yes.
Can you be my partner?
Okay, what?
Can you be my partner?
Can I be your partner?
Yeah, you said someone.
Oh, that'd be
outside class.
amazing.
You never specified it had to be a student, so.
Technically, yeah, I could probably be your partner.
Oh.
Alright, so it can be any teacher, it can be anybody, right?
Yeah, we give
So,
you partner number 3 before. You never set the limit of a partner, so you.
What if we do have a podcast?
well, yeah, you can have more than one partner. Okay?
But you never said how much, so we have a whole squad.
Yeah.
My
You're
brother
giving us
got
four.
Yeah. The only thing that I ask is you have to show that people are doing equal work, right? Because it's not fair if you have a partnership of 3 and one sleeping the whole time and the other 2 are doing the work, okay? So normally what I will do in that regard is if you're in a group, I'll give you a document, what's called a peer review, and you will pretty much rate how you thought your partner did. And if everybody says, hey, he slept the whole time, well, guess who's getting a 0 and taking the exam?
I guess it's easy to get a 0.
Okay, so that's pretty much why I'm working you through these things, okay? So next week, Monday, I should be in here. If I'm not, there will still be videos that literally I'm gonna create a video that walks you through setting up source notes in Word and filling it in, okay? So that you'll have that. I'm gonna walk you through the processes that I need you to do. So you'll have the videos, yes.
We only have 3 more weeks left of school, right?
Yeah, that's why. Okay. So does that sound fair? Okay. So just real quick, guys, let me walk you through how to use the database for your searches. So remember we came up with a question, our research question. You guys remember that? So the research question that you guys came up with was, how much accountability should a person with DID have for their clients? What you're gonna do is when you're researching, you're gonna use your research question to guide that. What keywords could we use for a search?
DID.
DID and accountability or crime, right? So I've made it kind of easier for you guys to get to the online databases. If you go to the main page of your class, I have given you the Purdue OWL link, and then also the Yale online database password is equals, okay? So you just click it and you don't have to go through the KIST anymore. You just go straight here. Mine took me straight to it because I've already pre-signed in. Remember, you're gonna use this Yale Academic One file. So you'd go here, select it. And then you're gonna go ahead and you can put your keywords in here. So we're gonna do dissociative. And you see it's right there, dissociative identity disorder. Normally what I'll do is click it and then that gives me 2,316. But I also want to know about maybe crime, right? So I'll type in crime. And now that gives me 2,291 academic journals. Are you guys listening? Yeah. Okay, here's what I want to make sure that you do. Make sure you have this clicked, full text documents. Because if you don't have it clicked, sometimes it'll just give you like a web address and then you click it and you have to pay for the actual article. You don't want that, right? You want it just automatically right here. So click that. I also click peer reviewed journals. Why?
Because they're more factual.
Yeah, they're more credible.
Credible.
And it tends to narrow down how many sort like entries I get. So see, it almost cut it in half, right?
Mhm.
So then what you're gonna do is you're just gonna scroll through and find an article that you feel fits. So some of these may not catch your eye, right? But look at this one. You see it?
Yes.
It says dissociative identity disorder, no excuse for criminal activity. Using multiple personalities as a bias for insanity defense, rarely successful. That one sounds like it would probably work, right? For my
Yeah.
stuff. So you click it. And then you have the article. Again, you can have it read to you or you can read it yourself. So with your source notes, what you would do is you would read it and find key points. Okay. Then you go down here at the bottom and you have your citation. Now you can fill in the top part. All right. And then you can actually copy and paste that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this article to create a video walking you step by step through the source notes. Okay. But then what you do is you have all that information. Now you have one source note down. You have one source. Now you just need 4 more. Sound easy?
Mhm.
Okay. So that's where I'm going to leave it today. Again, tomorrow's going to be like a scavenger hunt, kind of like the Blue Owl one. But I am going to create a series of videos to help you walk through each one. All right. Sound fair?
Yeah.
All right. Any questions? All right.
Did you just